For those that aren't familiar with me, my name is Miquela Hanselman, and I'm the Manager of Regulatory Affairs at the National Milk Producers Federation. I'll be giving the first part of our presentation, and then Dr. Danelle Bickett-Weddle will jump on, and Kelly Oliver with Kansas Department of Ag is also going to jump in at the end. So I believe we spoke to you guys last year about kind of this new program we're working on, farm biosecurity, but to start us off, I'm going to give a quick overview of what it is again, in addition to an overview of the National Dairy Farm Program for those that aren't familiar. Danelle will touch on kind of what we're trying to do with the database piece of farm biosecurity, and then Kelly's going to touch on how the exercise testing that database went. So for those that aren't familiar with what the National Dairy Farm Program is, it's really the consumer assurance program for the dairy industry. I can't remember what year it started. But the first area that we started with was animal care, and it was really the dairy industry's way of kind of letting consumers know that, hey, we're doing a good job taking care of our animals. So at this point, we have 5 different program areas, which include environmental stewardship, animal care, workforce development, antibiotic stewardship, and the newest is biosecurity. So the way the program kind of works is that dairy cooperatives or processors will sign up to participate in one of the program areas. So I'll kind of focus my overview on animal care because that's the one I'm most familiar with. So once they sign up, we work with subject matter experts, which include dairy farmers who are part of every step of setting the standards to draft these science-based standards and best management practices. So these are just really focused on the best standards to take care of your cows. So it can be anything from making sure calves have access to water to management practices. So, and then once those standards are set, our NMPF's board of directors will go through and approve them, and then that will go into the newest version of animal care. Once we have the new version of animal care, we have farm evaluators who are trained that will then go out onto the farms. So every cooperative and processor that signed up, all of their farms will have evaluations done by these second-party evaluators to basically see how they're doing compared to the standards. And then if they need to have a continuous improvement plan put in place to get them up to where the standards are. The evaluations are also verified by third-party verifications. So this is an outside party coming in and making sure that kind of the evaluations are going as they're supposed to and following the standards. And then lastly, to come full circle, the cooperatives and processors then get to use the data from these evaluations and proof points to talk to the consumers and customers. So farm animal care specifically has been huge when it comes to animal activist videos and really helping the dairy industry get through those. And then when we talk about environmental stewardship, they're doing really great things in that space when it comes to the net zero initiative and really trying to tell dairy's story about how we are being sustainable. So moving on to biosecurity specifically. So in 2020, NMPF received NADPRP funding to develop the farm biosecurity pillar. So the farm biosecurity pillar has 2 different arms. The first one being everyday biosecurity, which is really the everyday steps dairy farmers should be taking to protect the health of their herd and employees. So this is really the first step to reaching what the other arm is, which is enhanced biosecurity. And enhanced biosecurity is basically taking the secure milk supply program and bringing it into the farm program. So with the grant, there's been a few objectives we've had to reach. So this includes developing handouts and a manual, the online database, which Danelle is going to talk about later, developing a training, which basically helps producers and then evaluators who will be helping producers make those secure milk supply plans and explains to them how to put that plan together and how to get it into the database. And then we also had to do an exercise to test if the database transfer of those plans to states would actually work. So just to circle back on animal care, I really wanted to kind of highlight the reach of the farm program. So specifically, animal care focuses on, animal care represents 99% of the United States milk supply. So this program probably has, I believe, the farthest reach of any program for the dairy industry. And by bringing biosecurity in, we really get to utilize that reach to bring biosecurity to the forefront of dairy producers' minds and really get them started working on those plans, and then get to use those evaluators who are on farm to help them develop their secure milk supply plans. I did just want to highlight our biosecurity task force and everyone who contributed to the Everyday Biosecurity Manual. We have a great group of subject matter experts who have been so helpful in getting this program going. And of course, you'll get to hear from one in a few minutes, Dr. Danelle Bickett-Weddle. So just touching on the manual provides producers, as I said, the steps to get started and build additional protections for your cattle. So it's really that first step that will be needed for a foreign animal disease outbreak. And we also introduced the secure milk supply to readers in this manual as well. It includes 7 building blocks with best management practices, and all of these contribute to improving the health of the animals. And then we really work to make sure that the content aligns with the other farm program areas so that producers are already familiar with the approach. Looking at those specific 7 areas, we tried to come up with a graphic that represented that all of the areas are equally important to biosecurity, which is kind of why we did the wheel approach. But then we went to our task force and we said, hey, 7 areas is pretty overwhelming for a dairy farmer to start off with. Which do you think are the top 3 that if they're just starting thinking about biosecurity, that they should be focused on? So the top 3 the task force came back to us with were animal movements and contact, animal health and disease monitoring, and personnel. So for dairy farmers, these were the 3 that they should focus on to get going, and then they can touch on the other 4. And these align directly with the secure milk supply plan and enhanced biosecurity content. So we try to keep everything as smooth and with a nice flow as possible. As I mentioned, we've tried to develop a series of handouts to kind of touch on everything a dairy farmer might be questioning, and to make it as easy as possible to really start getting involved in biosecurity. So the first one is one that actually done with the Center for Food Security and Public Health at Iowa State that we just went through and co-branded. So that's cattle roads of exposure and disease examples. And then we went through and updated the step 1 and step 2 handouts, which is really like, this is your first step and it's a yes, no list. And then step 2 is a set of questions they can use to identify areas of strengths and their gaps. And each section aligns with those 7 building blocks that we mentioned before. And then step 3 is that everyday biosecurity plan, which is that first step to the enhanced biosecurity plan. We also, one thing that kept coming up when we were putting together the manual and when we talk with dairy producers is, what is a dairy premises identification and how is that different from all the other PIN numbers that they're given? So we've put together a handout on what the dairy prem ID is and what the other ones are to kind of help alleviate some of that confusion. And then again, these are just more of the handouts we worked on. We went through and we updated the secure milk supply handouts and co-branded them with the farm program. And these are all available still at the same location that they were previously. That's still on the secure milk supply website. And then we also went through and co-branded the signs that can be put up around the farm. So with that, I will turn it over to Danelle to talk to you a little bit about the biosecurity database.
Thanks so much, Miquela. So just as a reminder, when you pull up the FMD response plan from October of 2020, the movement standstill piece focuses on, susceptible animals, semen and embryos, and has the caveat that, they're not recommending the stop movement of milk, leaving that completely up to the states. And so this farm database was built with that in mind, is for the states to have a tool, if they so choose, to have a way to look at biosecurity for their dairy operations. Next slide. So if you were to open the secure milk supply plan, it's going to talk about recommendation or guidance, you might say, for dairies that are not infected, suspect, or contact. So the recommendations were either producers can continue moving milk to processing with a PIN and some sort of pre-certification, or stop moving milk, become a monitored premises with a PIN, ensure adequate biosecurity surveillance before requesting that movement permit. So both of those pieces, you see the pre-certification statement, and also the second one is ensure adequate biosecurity. So the farm database and the whole farm biosecurity program was essentially designed to try and help producers and the states meet that goal. Next slide. So if you pull up the table at the end of the Secure Milk Supply Plan, and should point out, Secure Milk Supply Plan, the food supply plans were funded by USDA in partnership with universities, industry, academia, all of the state and federal partners over the years that have contributed to it. So this one says, if raw milk movement permits are required, here are the various steps. Here it talks about biosecurity performance standards. So if you've been involved for any period of time, you remember all the things that were done with the University of Minnesota's proactive risk assessment. So again, trying to find tools to help producers meet that piece of it if a raw milk movement permit is required. Next slide, please. This second table you'll find in Secure Milk or Secure Beef, and this talks about biosecurity measures in the checklist. So this is kind of what we refer to as whole farm biosecurity. So recognizing that not all states will stop the movement of milk, but it's pretty understood that they will stop the milk movement of cattle, semen, and embryos based on the recommendations of USDA. So in order to meet that, that's what farm biosecurity can help producers do. So we'll show you a little bit about the database and how producers can put all their information in. So even if they don't need a raw milk movement permit, they still have an opportunity to get their information in for cattle, semen, and embryo movement permit requests. Next slide. So if you opened the Enhanced Biosecurity resources on the Secure Milk Supply website, you'll find a checklist, an information manual, a plan template, and the topics are listed on the left. Anything with an asterisk has those biosecurity performance standards that were all part of the pathway analysis in the risk assessment that was done. So any of this information that is out there currently is what was used to build the farm biosecurity database. Next slide. When you think about, all the parts and pieces that go into it, it's still a voluntary program, but being under the farm umbrella gives the producers an opportunity to work with trained evaluators to get this information up into the system. So what is on your screen right now is kind of the beta version. And it's an opportunity for producers to work with their evaluator or their herd veterinarian, or they themselves put information in. Again, it aligns, all of those points align with the topics that are in the Secure Milk Supply Enhanced Biosecurity checklist and template. We'll hear a little bit from Kelly Oliver, who was one of our testers of the database from the state official side, but it fits with all of the other farm programs. And so all of that has been beta tested over the years, and the evaluators are putting things in. So that user friendliness step-by-step tool is not going to change for the farm biosecurity program. So in order to access it, folks are going to need training, and that's in development right now. Next slide. So a little bit about the farm evaluators and participants. So I've been familiar with the farm program as an outsider for a really long time, and recognizing how big that group of people are, I have a whole lot better understanding. So just to kind of give that perspective, if farm biosecurity is offering an opportunity for folks to come in and write their enhanced biosecurity plan, there's kind of that helper along the way to make sure that the producers understand, the questions and how to answer them, and really at the end of the day, how to protect their herds. So that's where these animal care evaluators come in. There's about 390 of them, as we heard from Miquela. And so those are the folks that have the relationship with the producers, are out on their operations, and would be the ones to, help get this program implemented once it's released. So again, they'll have to go through training to get access to the database, because again, we want to make sure the information going in aligns with enhanced biosecurity plans. And ideally, at the end of the day, if the states want that information, we want to make sure it's good quality information for them. So all of these folks have to meet some minimum qualification requirements, and they go through certified training as an animal care evaluator, which includes both online and in person. For biosecurity, it will be an online only portion. Next slide. So the other piece of this is to share with state officials. So state officials are, wanting a place to house their dairy enhanced biosecurity plans. This would be one opportunity for them. If a producer builds it and says, yeah, I would like my state official to take a look at it, they will get to opt in on that opportunity. Again, everything's voluntary. If the states like to do things before an outbreak and they have producers in there that want to review it, they certainly can. And obviously the goal is to make sure things are available during an outbreak for movement permit requests. So again, developing the training for state officials that want to access that is in development. So we'll have more to come on that as well. Next slide. So we had an objective to do information exchange. And so Kansas Department of Agriculture hosted a functional exercise. And so they allowed us to be a part of that. So we're absolutely grateful to Sarah McReynolds and to Kelly Oliver for letting us, participate in that program, worked with SES ahead of time to get our injects and our objectives into the overall 3-day exercise. So again, just really grateful that you guys allowed us to test it with you. Next slide. So 4 objectives to do. The first one we did prior to the actual exercise because we had to get an enhanced plan in there. Second, we want to evaluate the process for an official to review that and then demonstrate the ability for them to view it upon receiving a milk movement permit request. So that was during the exercise as well. And then at the end of the day, what does that data transfer look like? So does the state need some type of information out of that system to say that they looked at the plan, or do they want a copy of the plan, or just, some key data points? So we worked with KDA prior to the exercise to figure out kind of what information they wanted to do. And then we transferred it to their state database. Next slide. So that first objective, we did a live virtual training with Kelly, and you'll get to hear her perspective here in a little bit. So we had the National Milk Producers Farm team on biosecurity, as well as the database developers, walk her through kind of what that looks like from a producer perspective to get a plan in. Because we were in beta, we had de-identified information, but actually used a real farm. We just were blinded to what that real farm's PIN number and actual information were for the test. Next slide. Objectives 2, 3, and 4 happened live the morning of December 13th. So they set up their permitting group because they knew they were going to stop milk movement and needed to have an opportunity to permit anybody in those first 72 hours that wanted to request it. So Kelly was gracious enough to put it up on the big screen, and we just sat back and watched her interact with it. Watched the email, which she got on the left-hand side, watched, what happened as things popped up into the system for her to be able to go look at those and deem them acceptable or not acceptable. Next slide. So the strengths that we identified through the exercise were that the notifications that were provided gave them the key details they needed. So something would pop up when a producer shared it. So they were notified that something is there to go look at. She was able to view and download those full enhanced biosecurity plans and the checklist from the database. And then she was able to export, after she reviewed, she was able to export that data to put into their own state database. Next slide. As with anything, we have some areas for improvement, which is why you exercise. We had 2 emails show up, so we want to make sure the system is only sending 1. And it allowed us to kind of test what would be helpful to a really busy state official getting a bunch of emails coming in, what kind of information they wanted in that notification. The navigation was a little clunky. We didn't actually do training on that prior to the outbreak or exercise, excuse me. And so we're going to make sure that that is clearly explained in all of the training and change a few of the buttons just to make it a little more intuitive. And then the CSV file is what they determined would be the best file type for them to download. Lots of options with the database, but CSV is what was chosen. So we want to make sure that as that thing gets transferred, it can be opened on a variety of computers and the data fields don't have any artificialities. We had a comma that looked kind of weird, so just things to clean up. Next slide. All right, so exercise was deemed successful. We're really grateful to Kansas Department of Ag and SES for the opportunity, and again to USDA for the NADPRP funding to allow this to occur. In the future, we'd love to test it with additional state officials, get some more enhanced biosecurity plans in there for folks to review. Again, try info transfer to other state databases. KDA used USA Herds at the time. Online training is in development, so we'll have some information coming out for anybody that wants to be on the evaluator or producer side of things, as well as state officials. Shared in the chat several links to information coming, but you saw Miquela sharing that there's more to come, so that's something to stay tuned for. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to connect with the CAM committee to share what we've done so far, and more to come, more to socialize. So next slide. Now I'll turn it over to Kelly, the superstar that helped us test this whole program. Next slide.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kelly Oliver, and I serve as the animal health planner for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And, back in December, I had the opportunity to pilot this database during our annual FMD exercise, and just wanted to share a little bit of feedback that I gave to Danelle and Miquela during that process. When a plan is inputted into that database on the information that is provided, that biosecurity checklist is automatically generated. So that saved me a lot of time in reviewing the plans, ensuring I received all the checklists and documents that we required from our producers to send in when requesting a permit. So that was a big time saver on my side of things. Anytime that we can automate any messaging and whatever it is that we're doing is a time saver, and it's definitely a must during an outbreak. This site was very easy to navigate, really user-friendly. I saw it from the producer side and the state side, made a few suggestions, but overall very user-friendly, which I really appreciate. Had a few suggestions on some interpretation, just making sure that the question that's being asked was the question that was intended, the intent of the question. All that information is being collected. The more people that review it, the more people that navigate through it, I think we can really help clarify some of those things and make sure we're getting exactly what we want. A couple of wish list items. A lot of our secure milk supply plans here in Kansas have multiple images of their maps included in that plan. And that database was only letting us upload one image at a time. It's my understanding the developers have already fixed that issue, so you can upload multiple images, and that will be really helpful. And I'm just really excited for the potential opportunity to have all of the dairy plans in one location throughout this database. So really appreciated the opportunity to be able to test this database, give it a go, give some feedback. I think it's going to be a really great tool for all of us to utilize down the road. That's all I have, but we'll definitely open it up for any questions that you have for Miquela, Danelle, or myself.